And then as I begun this spiritual path, I realized what is life without relationships and what is spirituality without relationships.
With respect to the saffron clothing, I just want to ask you a little bit about why do you wear saffron and what is the significance of the tilak?
Spirituality is three things: bhakti, devotion; vidya, knowledge; and sadhana, practice.
So you've created a series of very special meditations for us. So firstly, we are deeply grateful for that, and we are so lucky that you found the platform worthy.
The way in which people relax in this world is they're looking for an escape from their life. But the amazing thing is, none of these things provide a permanent escape.
So, Keshava Swami Maharaj, thank you for gracing us with your presence on the LSM podcast. We are recording this for the viewers right after you've been on the Ranveer show. So, for the viewers who are listening, and they've obviously enjoyed that episode of yours, so I'm going to treat this as almost like a part 2. And in a way, Ranveer, like my younger brother, would have asked some very curious questions. I will try to attempt the older side of the questions. So thank you so much for firstly gracing us with your presence on this, and we are so grateful that you made the time to share the wisdom with everybody listening in.
Thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here, and we really appreciate the work and the incredible service and contribution of Level SuperMind and the app and the podcast in really bringing spirituality to people in a very relevant and dynamic way, which is perhaps one of the greatest needs in the world today.
So I want to ask you, with respect to spirituality, it's great that you spoke about the fact that bringing spirituality to all. Now, why is it important to bring spirituality to all?
Deep within us, we all search for something more to life. Deep within us sits curiosity and inquisitiveness. Deep within us sits a desire to experience a higher level of love, a higher level of fulfillment. But for most of us, there's no real alternative or no real path that's been illumined, which is inspiring and practical in our life. And so I think spirituality is something which every person seeks, whether they seek it through a religion, whether they seek it through intoxication, or whether they seek it through a certain type of adventure or experience. We're all looking to explore what more there may be to life. And therefore, I think that sits deep within everyone.
That's so beautiful, that people are trying to explore even spirituality through intoxication or exploration. And it's actually the first time I'm hearing that perspective, on spirituality. So this innate need to explore what lies beyond us, why is it there in us?
In the ancient Bhagavad-gita, Krishna is explaining that we are spiritual beings, that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but we're spiritual beings temporarily in a human existence. And therefore, because we're spiritual beings, we, in our deepest, innermost chambers of our heart, seek spiritual connection. The famous Christian writer C.S. Lewis said, "If I find within myself a desire which no experience of this world can fulfill, then I must conclude I was made for another world." And so that is why we seek spirituality, because we are spiritual beings.
With respect to the Bhagavad-gita, you do a lot of work bringing the youth and, people of all ages to the contents and the lessons from the Bhagavad-gita. So why is it important for people who wish to go on the spiritual path to engage with the Bhagavad-gita? What secrets lie within?
I first picked up the Gita when I was 15 years old. and I've been studying it ever since for over 25 years now. And as I studied the Gita, what occurred to me was that the Gita is the ultimate book in self-development. They say if you want a new idea, go to an old book. And when I used to walk into any bookshop and look at what kind of books people were interested in, self-development, smart thinking, how to become the best version of yourself. And as I was simultaneously reading the Gita, I was realizing that the ultimate self-development is contained within the ancient scriptures. So for example, if you want to know how to make the best decisions, or if you want to know how to avoid burnout, or if you want to know how to find love, or if you want to know, the best way in which you can maximize your purpose and potential, then all these secrets are contained within the Gita. But all that's required is to unpack that theology in a very accessible and practical way for people.
And how do you, what's your approach to make it accessible and unpack it? Because so many people follow you and so many people find solace in your way. So I'm curious to understand your way of unpacking. And then I'm also curious to understand the answers to some of the points you posed, which are answers, because they are great questions in themselves. But, before that, a little bit of, how is it that you serve?
My mother always used to tell me, you've been given 2 ears and 1 mouth. And that tells you something, that you should hear twice as much as you speak. And therefore, what I've tried to do for many years is hear from people what's going through their minds, what's going through their hearts, what's going on in their lives, what are their needs, what are their interests, what are their concerns. And so for many years, I've just been fascinated in understanding what is the human journey and what do people experience in their life? What do they need help with? And with all of that information, I go back to the Gita and then I ask myself, what does the Gita bring to the table to help people? And it's amazing because every time I come back to the Gita, I always find a connection. Every single need, interest, and concern has been talked about and explored in the Gita, and it's just about making that connection. And so I try to make connection before doing communication. And that means hearing from people. And then hopefully when we share the Gita, we're really speaking to people and what they're going through in their life.
Actually with this, you've answered a very, how would I put it? You've touched upon a very important point, because sometimes people wonder that, this guy is a monk, he's detached from life. So how is he advising me on love? How is he advising me on friendship? I mean, friendship you would have, but, how is he advising me on matters of business? Because he's not living that life. But I think this is a very important point you've put, which is that a lot of people are unpacking themselves in front of you. So you have seen, if one looks at it from a mathematical perspective also, you've seen as much variety of life that the two ears can provide. And therefore, the perspective that somebody then gets from you would be that much richer, because you've seen so many shades of life.
Yeah.
And you've been doing this for how long?
I've been a monk for over 2 decades. I began my journey in my teens. And after I graduated from university, I became a full-time monk at the age of 21, not too far from here in South Mumbai in Chowpatty. And over 2 decades later, I continue that journey, continuing to learn, continuing to evolve. Not a perfect specimen, but a work in progress, but feeling incredible evolution on that journey. And yes, as monks, we don't eject ourselves from the world. But what we can do as monks is look at the world, but from a observer's perspective. sometimes I can offer insights into love and relationships because I can see that whole situation and that dynamic going on from an observer's perspective. I can see two sides of the story, and therefore I can then go back into the world and give people perspectives that they may not be able to see. One English writer says it's difficult to see the picture when you're inside the frame. So being a monk and somewhat detached from the world actually helps us to sometimes have certain insights into the world that others may not see.
So how can one love more openly? And how can one really experience love?
Yeah. I think one of the things we misunderstand about love is we think it's a feeling. And it definitely is a feeling, but love is also an act. Love is also an expression, a tangible contribution. Love is based on service. Love is based on sacrifice. Love is based on commitment. In ancient Vedic teachings, sometimes they say, you don't marry the one you love, but you learn to love the one you marry. And that might seem like a revolutionary concept in the world today. But the idea is that attraction, chemistry may bring us together, but commitment will keep us together. And therefore, when talking about love, we very much talk about commitment and service and sacrifice. And these investments in a relationship allow one to actually develop a much deeper connection than simply physical attraction.
And I'm curious to understand this. What is your view on separation or divorce? What is the Vedic view on that? And when is it okay?
Sure.
Or is it okay?
Yeah. I'll preface this question to just saying something which I think is important for us to understand conceptually. When we read spiritual literature, there are principles, there is a certain culture, there's a certain way of functioning. But as we know, generations come and go, times change, the world evolves, the society in which we're living transforms. And therefore, although spiritual knowledge in principle always remains eternally perfect, what will happen is that over time, the detail of how we then apply those principles may change. So in ancient spiritual culture, the concept of separation or divorce was not really something which was prevalent, something which was seen to happen. As time goes by, our world changes. Different dynamics have come in. We're no longer living in a Vedic culture as it was lived in that time. And therefore, in this day and age, certain things may be required in order for people to live progressive, happy, pragmatic lives. And so we would say that something like separation or divorce, although not encouraged, because that sense of commitment, once we've made it, is something that if we can honor and see through, brings great wealth in one's life. But in certain situations, we cannot be rigid and we cannot be just stuck in a certain way of thinking. And therefore, in certain situations, when relationships become toxic, when relationships become harmful to people's physical, emotional health, in situations where the two individuals in the relationship are not facilitating each other to grow and to evolve in their own lives, then in such situations we may say maybe it's time to go different ways.
And what is the consequence of that for people if they go different ways? You know, in this context of, as you mentioned, if it's getting toxic, if people are not helping each other grow, if there is no nourishment for each other, that's again a consequence of action. And that's also a consequence of wavering from the commitment to some extent. It could also be that the union itself came to be without awareness, because sometimes we are not even aware of what union we are forming, because we may not be aware of ourselves. So, given all these factors, what are the consequences of this separation then, from a karmic perspective?
The goal of life, as we said, is to love. And love is based on service, sacrifice, and commitment. If in one situation one feels unable to maintain that commitment, continually sacrifice and serve in that situation, if it becomes unsustainable to do that and one has to separate, the consequence of that is not so much in the act of separation, but the consequence will be determined by what do you do after you make that decision to separate. Do you then become committed to something else? Do you then learn to sacrifice for someone else? Do you then learn to enter into another relationship wiser and ready to give yourself in a deeper way? If that's the case, then the consequence of that separation will actually be very positive in one's life, because it has ultimately led to growth. We have to understand that divinity is not there setting rules, hoping that we fail and setting us up for doom. There are certain ways of living that are encouraged in scripture because they're helping us to achieve the totality of what life can be. And so, if in a certain situation we have to stray away from that framework, but we're ultimately going towards living that more progressive and positive life, then divinity is happy about that and will not hold it against us. And so I think it's really, really important to highlight this, because sometimes people think of God or the divine person as someone who's just striking down thunderbolts when someone does something which is not, ordained in the scripture. But rather that divinity is just setting a path for us to be the best versions of ourselves and unlock happiness. And so it's more about where that decision takes you than the decision itself. That's clear. Yeah.
I feel like as I'm hearing you speak, I feel like almost like a shower of blessings coming on me, because that's just so eloquently that you speak, and you have seen life through so many nuances. And before I move to the process of growth, with respect to unions, before one forms a union with a partner, what are some of the things one should ask the other before forming a union?
Everyone in their life should have a North Star, a purpose. In Sanskrit, we also use the word dharma to notate this, that we all have a goal. When two people come together, if their goals are aligned, then there's much more chance that that relationship will be successful. So the first thing we should try to look for is that here is a person in whom we share the same aspirations, the same goals, the same North Star, the same ultimate aspiration. That's a really good starting point. The next thing is that we should look for someone who has a complementary personality. Two people in a relationship don't have to be exactly the same, but what they do have to be is complementary. They have to understand each other's personalities and be able to interact in such a way as to strengthen their partner's strengths and also help them to overcome their weaknesses. And as we have complementary personalities, we get to know each other. That is also another vital ingredient in healthy relationships. The other thing that's really, really important is just the ability to communicate and be open and honest. One should always test the ground with this when forming a relationship, because where there is communication and a sense of ability to express and reveal the heart, then there's much more opportunity to progress in that relationship and overcome any obstacles that may come. So these are some of the general principles, and then ultimately, yes, there should be some attraction, of course, on different levels to that other soul. And like this, we can
finally a human.
Yes.
The
Yes.
ability to be human also.
Ability to be human. Yes, definitely. Yeah. So I think when forming a union, we look on human levels, we look on more emotional levels, and then we also look on spiritual levels. And the more we have in common on these different levels, then there's more opportunity for that relationship to flourish. Yeah.
So I recently, I haven't released the song yet, but I built a song which is kind of on the same theme, So as you've spoken it, the words in Hindi go, "Tu mausiki, main tera asar, tu zindagi aur main basar, zubaan tu, main alfaz hoon, hai roshni tu aur main asar." And then when you said we should not be the same, so that's the theme of the song, which is "Sahi hai yahi hai, ki hum ek hi hai, पर हूबहू से हम एक नहीं है। सही है यही है कि हम एक ही है थोड़े अलग पर अलग हम नहीं है। मिले जुले यूं हम तुम, तो हो गई खुशियाँ सब घुम हो गई। I got this wrong. मिले यूं हम तुम, तो हो गए घम सब घुम. So, kind of togetherness through a relationship also helps you, can love be, or can a relationship be helping you go higher on your spiritual journey?
One African proverb says, if you want to walk fast, walk alone. But if you want to walk far, walk with many. We come into contact with different people in our life, whether that be a romantic partner, or whether that be parents, or whether that be friends or colleagues. All of these people come into our life not by chance, because all of them have a unique ingredient to add to our life. And so, yes, we evolve through relationships, we evolve in community, and we learn so much of ourselves through interaction with others. When I became a monk, I was kind of the opinion that now it's just me and God. And now I'm going to walk away from the world, and it's just this lonely path between me and God. And that was inspiring to me. I was kind of a strange kid. I was walking away from relationships. And then as I began this spiritual path, I realized, what is life without relationships? And what is spirituality without relationships? It is in these exchanges, it is in this bonds of love that we create. It is in these moments together that we experience divinity, we experience the beauty of spirituality. And so nowadays I feel like the relationships I have with people are my greatest asset. Like if you'd ask me what's my greatest wealth in my life, hands down I would say the relationships I have with other people. Because it's in those relationships that we unlock our potentiality of spirituality.
So, for the listeners who are listening in so far, and even for, maybe me in the room and the others listening in the room, so far you've been contributing to people a lot. How can people contribute to you?
I think already so many people have contributed to me in my life. So many people encouraged me So many people showed their appreciation and gratitude. All of these words of kindness coming from the heart empower us to do what we do in life. We put some content out there on the internet and people appreciate it, and they show that appreciation. And that appreciation infuses us to feel, yes, I can make a contribution, and that inspires us to continue. So my only prayer is to continue having the kind encouragement, and also I should say the kind feedback as well, because even the feedback that people give, the critical feedback, is often incredibly valuable to help us evolve as well. And I think just having that, being on that journey together is a real contribution to our life. And the other thing I would say is that we began this podcast by talking about how the greatest need in the world is spirituality. But what people want to see is not just spirituality in a book. They want to see spirituality in a person. People don't just want a written theology. They want to see a living theology. And therefore, if I was to make one request of how people can help me, not just help me, but help the world, is I think by going on this spiritual journey and unlocking their spiritual potential and that beauty within. And I think by them doing that, they make the greatest contribution to the world.
It's so beautiful that I asked you what people can contribute to you, and you responded by a contribution to them. So I guess I'm taking out from allowing people to be contributed to is the contribution they can make to you.
Yes. Sometimes I feel like people allowing us to serve them, people allowing us to give to them, in that giving we are receiving more. And therefore we're so grateful that people give us an opportunity to give to them.
How does one reach this place, with, I don't know if it's the right question to ask you, because at a very early age, you walked away from the trappings of life. So the things that bind us, pursuit of wealth, pursuit of, any kind of agendas, and you're very steadfast on the one agenda of wanting to serve. So how do you reach that place?
I think we have to put ourselves out there and try to experience the beauty of giving.
Did you fail in this process?
I fail every day.
How?
But I always try to come back to that taste of service. Yeah, Rabindranath Tagore, he said, while awake, I thought life was about joy. How does he say? He said, while I went to sleep, he said, while I was awake, I thought life was joy. You can correct me if I'm wrong, you may know this one. While I was awake, I thought life was joy. I went to sleep and I realized life is work. But then I woke up and I started serving and I realized service is joy. We find ourselves by thinking of others is meant to make a beautiful contribution to others. Sometimes people ask us the question, what is my dharma? What is my purpose? And so we give them a very simple formula. Your passion plus your expertise plus what you can use in contribution equals your dharma. Sometimes people think their dharma is just their passion and their expertise. What they really want to do and what they're good at is their dharma. But if you don't, what you're good at and what you're attracted to, if you don't use it in service, it can't really be said to be your dharma.
So how does one use it in service if, I mean, let's break it down a bit, right? Like, so let's say somebody's running a business. That's, their expertise. Let's say the business is in a particular domain.
Sure.
Let's say it's in an area of technology. And so it's a business in an area of technology. And then one says that, look, I'm going to serve. Now,
how do they practically do that?
How do they practically do that? So if I just to unpack that a little bit, let's say that, there is a transaction in most businesses. So there is a price, there is as part of that price, there is an expectation of service level commitment. Yes, so you may have the intention to serve, but inbuilt in that contract is an expectation of service level commitment. There is somewhere you have to also maintain your pricing. So let's say that, you need to put 100 people on that particular job or 1,000 people on that particular job. And you need to, control that cost, because that service can only be given at that particular cost, because that's what the market commands. Now, if you're maintaining that cost, and if you're doing that, some people who are being put into the cost might feel squeezed. Today the whole income inequality debate, and that's where I'm trying to come from, which is that I may be wrong about the statistic, but it's roughly 0.1% of the world's population that controls
99% of the wealth.
Yeah, close to 80% of the wealth. And then the remainder of the world's population is, and again, I will verify this in the captions, but the remainder of the world's population is then being made to suffice within the remaining percentage. Now, when you have such large disparity, and then you have, therefore, we are going into what is a dog eats dog world. Effectively, we've created the circumstance for that. As a human population, we've created the circumstance for that. It's not like one wants to do that, but sometimes you're living in that paradigm. So how does one view that?
You're living in the world. If you're a business person, an entrepreneur, you have to be streetwise. You have to move with the ways of the world to some extent in order to survive, in order to thrive in your business. But underlying that is always the motivation to serve. And therefore, the influence, the income, the intelligence, all these things that come from your business, over time you try to employ more and more of this into making a positive contribution to people's lives. If an entrepreneur in the beginning years of their business has to squeeze a little bit, has to kind of cut costs here and there in order to get the business to a certain point, that may be necessary. But they know that's not the end. The end is not just to make money and be on top of that, entrepreneurial ladder. But they know, I want to get there so then I can serve better. I can do more for people. Maybe then I can open up a free option for the underprivileged and give all of this out to people who otherwise wouldn't have access. So, yes, we have to be streetwise, but always with the vision of how can I then, when the opportunities arise, use this to create a positive change in the world.
Amazing. I'm sure that a lot of entrepreneurs listening to this would find that, quite useful in the context of where they can take themselves. Like I can take my own example in some context. I have to battle this often. Price. Sometimes I have to be stringent on salary because the market demands that. I don't like it. I know it's difficult for some of the people who are working. I can't give that raise, even though as much as I'd want to, because I have to operate under certain thresholds. And then, maybe we have the opportunity to serve in other ways. So one thing I like about GEV, the place, you just visited, run by Gauranga Prabhu, I like the fact that the temple town is serving the entire district. So I like that, and then I try to contribute to that. So now we are working with them on 2 projects. One is the Vidyan project, which is for the kids in Palghar district, where the kids are sometimes in the 8th grade, but in mathematics and English they have the proficiency of a 2nd grader. So the Vidyan project is to create almost like centers inside their villages, in 17 villages, to create centers inside the villages where the kids can come after school and upgrade themselves over a 1-year period, so that their proficiency levels go from 3rd grade to actually 8th grade where they're supposed to be. So that's a wonderful service that they are doing, and we are so happy that we get to be a part of that and contribute and run that program with them. Or if it's like the other program which they're doing amazing work with is they're working with the Mensa India chapter to identify from almost 11,000 kids, 150 to 200 kids who are very, very high potential, high IQ, and who have the potential to shine. So once you identify the kids who can really go up, accelerate their growth journey very, very fast, they can be enabled to various companies for scholarships. Because people like to give, but they want to know where to give. So I think some of these, and that's what I find fascinating about the world today, is that the monks of the world today are not just monks in the sense that they are away from the world, but they're one with the world. So that is what I find fascinating, and even including the work that you do, which is, so with the world and in the world. And that's what the world needs more of. Like, why do you do what you do?
Yeah, like we often tell people, when the compass of knowledge is combined with the passion to serve, then it becomes compassion. And therefore, people think of spirituality sometimes as just an intellectual thing. Oh, these guys believe in a philosophy. These guys believe, they meditate, they pray. It's all about their salvation. But as we were speaking with Ranveer this morning, he said to me, my understanding is that spirituality is 3 things: bhakti, devotion; vidya, knowledge; and sadhana, practice. And then he said to me, am I wrong? Am I missing anything? I said, Ranveer, you're right on the spot. But just one thing we need to add to that is seva, service. Because without service, we cannot truly grasp the essence of spirituality. And that service means on all levels, to help people on the physical level, to help people on a material educational level, to help communities to have enough resource and enough well-being so that they can live at an appropriate standard, and then also to give spiritual knowledge. And I think sometimes what's happened is we've either said it's all about material welfare work and we've divorced the spirituality from it. Yeah. Or we've said, no, the material stuff is temporary anyway. It's only about spiritual knowledge. And then we've sidelined that. But with projects like GEV and the kind of things that you're talking about, what we're actually doing is combining material, physical, emotional, communal, social, and spiritual.
Yeah. It's such an exciting world, actually, the way it's shaping up. Because, just really all those dimensions that you spoke about is really the joy of being human. And is the ability to explore our full potential as human beings. Now, when we are talking about this, I think, you spoke about seva. And am I right in saying seva is somewhere linked to karma yoga?
Yes, karma yoga means connecting your actions to the divine and to those around us.
So the question I have is, a lot of people mistake karma yoga and the word karma. So can you help differentiate the two?
Yeah. Of course, karma is a complex word. Sometimes it refers to action. Sometimes it can refer to a reaction. Sometimes it can refer to the law by which you get a reaction for an action. So people use it in a different context. But generally, when we talk about karma, it means activity. Karma yoga obviously means to connect. It comes from the Sanskrit word yuj. So karma yoga means when you connect your activities to the divine and to a spiritual purpose. Going to work can be karma or it can be karma yoga. If you go to work just to make money so that you can enjoy in this world, that's karma. But if you go to work to earn that money, to maintain your family, but then in that work you use your knowledge to share and serve with others, you use your influence, you use your monetary gains for some higher spiritual cause, then what's happening is that work now becomes karma yoga, because it's activity which is connected to a higher purpose. So most people in the world, they're just doing karma. They're acting in the world. But by having a little bit of spiritual knowledge, they can learn how to connect all of those things for a higher purpose. And then it becomes seva, karma yoga. An artist can paint and make that a beautiful service to the world. A musician can make music which changes people's lives and creates a revolution of consciousness. A business person can make money and then use that money to change many people's lives. And in this way, everyone can do their occupation and connect it to a higher cause, and then it becomes karma yoga.
It's a fine line though, isn't it? Because it's sometimes you can delude yourself into thinking that
I'm doing karma yoga
when you may be actually serving yourself or your own interests. So what are the signs that help us really differentiate whether am I doing karma or am I doing karma yoga?
Of course, when we look deep in our hearts with that sincerity, and when we have to face ourselves in the mirror, then we clearly know, am I doing this in a selfless spirit or am I doing it in a selfish spirit? That sincerity will be very revealing to us to help us make the distinction. But then, of course, there are other signs by which we can understand whether we're actually connecting our activities to the divine. One of them is we can see what is the practical effect. What changes have I made in people's lives? What improvements have I made to the world? What have I actually tangibly contributed? That should be visible. Someone should be able to see. Because if you are actually doing karma yoga, then you will be moving people's hearts. You'll see by your seva, by your selfless service. So I think when we do this honest and sincere reflection and we take stock of the effect of our activities, then we can clearly see how much seva is there in our life.
Is there like a...
And sorry, just one other thing I would say is that the other telltale sign that you're actually doing karma yoga, selfless service, seva, is that you'll just feel satisfied. Simple as that. If we live a selfish life, we may have everything, but the telltale sign is that we will still be feeling a vacuum within. We tell people the richest person is not the one who has the most, but the one who needs the least, because they have truly become fulfilled through seva. So when we feel that deep fulfillment, that contentment, that sense of completeness, then we know that, yes, there is seva in my life.
From, this perspective of growth and, reaching these higher thoughts or, sensing your intuition better, does meditation play a role? And does, so I'm curious actually now to go into two paths around meditation. One is the scriptural understanding of meditation, and one is the scientific understanding of meditation. So I'd love to go into a little bit of both. So, to start with, what do the scriptures say about meditation, and why is meditation an important ingredient for everybody today?
Yeah. They once did a survey to find out the top ways in which people relax in the world. And the 4 top ways in which people relax in the world is: number 1, they go on holiday. Number 2, they go to sleep. Number 3, they take intoxication. And number 4 is they watch a movie. I just want you to think about those 4 and tell me, what do they have in common? Go on holiday, take intoxication, go to sleep, watch a movie.
What do they have in common? It's about going away.
Each one of those activities are an escape. Isn't it amazing that the way in which people relax in this world is they're looking for an escape from their life? But the amazing thing is, none of these things provide a permanent escape. You can take intoxication, but then it wears off. You can go to sleep, but eventually you have to wake up. You can go on holiday, but you can't perpetually be on holiday. You watch a movie, but after a few hours, you have to come back to life. Innate within us is a desire to find a space, a sacred space, where we can actually find some respite from life. And so, spiritually, meditation is that space which allows us to, it's that sacred space in which we can enter to recharge, rejuvenate, and reconnect with our spiritual essence. And so, in traditions across the world, meditation is a daily practice. That we don't just, nowadays people live in the virtual world. There's the virtual world and then there's the real world. But then we tell people also there's the inner world. And just as we're spending time every day in the virtual world and the real world, also make sure you spend some time every day in the inner world. Because when you come from that space, seeing the world inside out, then you become more empowered to deal with life.
So, I'm curious. So that's a good place to go into, which is the virtual world and the real world and the inner world. And, what do the scriptures tell us about the why to meditate and the how to meditate?
So the why to meditate is we enter the inner world of meditation as a means to remember our spiritual identity. But we don't exist in a vacuum as a spiritual entity. As a spiritual entity, we have a spiritual source. And therefore, meditation is an opportunity to remind ourselves of our spiritual identity and then connect with our spiritual source. And therefore, there are different techniques and different ways and means to do that. In our tradition, mantra becomes or is recommended as the most effective and efficient means to achieve that divine connection. Mantra, for our viewers, means sound vibration that frees the mind, which awakens our deeper spiritual consciousness and which brings us face to face with the divine.
So are mantras energized from the ages?
Mantras are like sound vibrations which are said to be non-different from the divine. Now, what do I mean by that? Here we have some water. And if I say the word water, then although it indicates the substance water, it's different from water. If I'm thirsty and I say water, it won't quench my thirst because it's simply indicative of the real substance. But mantras or spiritual sound vibrations are said to be absolute. So when one says the mantra, the name of divinity, the name of God, then it's said that that name is God. And therefore, by chanting that name, by tuning into that vibration, one actually comes in the presence of God. One actually comes in union with God. And therefore, it's not just something which is energizing a mantra, but it's something which is actually divine.
Is there some worldly or scientific kind of evidence to what you're saying about one with the divine?
Meditation works on many levels. So far we've talked about the deep spiritual significance of meditation. But then there is also an emotional, psychological benefit of meditation. And then there's also even a physical benefit of meditation. And mantras, for example, mantras are often used to cure even physical illnesses. Mantras are also used to bring the mind into a calmer state, into a state where it's able to find more clarity. And then on the deeper spiritual level, mantras are giving us connection with the divine. So many scientific studies have been done to show the psychological and physical benefits of meditation and of mantras. In one famous experiment, just to show the power of sound, they had 3 plants. And what they did is they played different types of music to the 3 different plants. One was a very kind of dark, kind of very subdued type of music. And then another one was a very passionate type of music. And then another one was a very kind of classical and subtle type of music. And the plants grew in different ways. Another one is a famous experiment is on crystals, water crystals, who were again exposed to different types of sound. And they looked at the formations after being exposed to different types of sounds, very different. So sound is very powerful. It's just like, say, for example, I played one of your favorite songs from like 20 years ago. So as soon as you hear that, so many memories, so many feelings, so many emotions and people and events will come to your mind, because sound has an incredible connection with our subconscious.
At a metaphysical level, is there some link like that with mantra? Because, over the ages, so many people have kind of united around a single mantra. So yes, there is one feeling that I have with respect to a particular song of this generation, but like a mantra which is on since eternity. And people have, their healing linked to it, and their growth journeys linked to it, and their spiritual discovery linked to it from the ages. So one is this song, which is my favorite song, or for a generation, a favorite song. And so many people are connecting to that music. And then you have mantra, which is passed on from ages. For thousands of years, people have been kind of chanting one mantra. And then they've linked their growth to it. They've linked their cleansing through it. They've linked their spiritual discovery to it. So is there some metaphysical link of like a mantra which goes through the years, through the ages, and then does it then like a snowball gather more power as we go on with time, or how does that work?
I think the fact that mantras have been passed down through generations may not be so much that they're gaining power because of the time that they've been passed down through, but rather the fact that they've been passed down for generations and they're continuing to be employed for meditation is a reconfirmation that they are ultimately descending from a spiritual plane. A material sound is created in the material world and therefore can trigger material memories. But a mantra which descends from a otherworldly place, a metaphysical place, a spiritual place, can then awaken spiritual memory within you. One of the songs of this world will maybe take you back 10 years, 20 years to another material time in this life. But when you hear a mantra, it can take you back to many lifetimes ago, at a time when you were in the spiritual realm and you were in your spiritual identity, and it can reconfirm to you that I'm not a being of this world, but I'm a being meant for another world. And so that's the great potentiality, spiritual potentiality of mantra.
Yeah, that's a very, I wouldn't say a scientific, but a very practical way of looking at it. That if something is existing across the ages, it must have impact enough for it to pass on to the next, and to the next, and to the next. So that is what we mean by timeless. And
like the Hare Krishna mantra.
Yeah, I was actually
words.
just going to come to that, like the Hare Krishna mantra. Could you, for the listener, explain what it means? Like when one is meditating on the Hare Krishna mantra, when I am chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, what feeling should I be chanting with? And what outcome or what input am I feeling from the word? So what is the feeling I should be giving, and what is the feeling I should be looking to receive?
The Hare Krishna mantra is made of 3 words. Krishna means the all-attractive one. Rama means the reservoir of all pleasure. And Hara refers to the feminine divine, the energy of God. Now, when these words are put in this combination and chanted by the practitioner, it's explained that what this mantra is it's a cry of the soul. Crying is a very interesting emotion. There's not one person in this world who hasn't cried, and there's probably not one person in this world who won't cry at some point in the future. Crying is so much a part of our life. One of our poets says, if you added together all of the tears that the soul has shed over many lifetimes for material things, it would be enough to fill an ocean. And therefore people cry for material things. But the Hare Krishna mantra is essentially the cry of the soul to achieve communion with the divine. If you think about a baby crying for the mother, that intensity, that desire, that desperation, that complete determination to attract the attention of the mother that is expressed in that cry is the ideal mood of the chanter who wants to connect with the divine.
So have a desire to connect.
A desire. For
almost
example,
like give yourself.
Yes. Like in the very famous song, My Sweet Lord by George Harrison, in which he chants,
I really want to see you.
I really want to see you. I really want to see you. But it takes so long. And that sense of longing to be reconnected to the person who loves us the most. And so that is what the mantra is. It's a seeking of connection with the divine in love. And so it's chanted in that spirit.
Can I share with you one interpretation that I had, which was also, I found very cute. So the interpretation I had was, again, you're inviting, you're saying, please come, Krishna, which is the universal divine. And Krishna loves Makhan. So, I am putting all my impurities up, which is coming as Makhan. Come and take it away. And Ram is the light within. So come, please come, Ram, and the divine, and come and bring me your light within. I mean, now this is a much more, when you've spoken about the feminine divine, I'm curious to go a little bit into that also. But I think the main, like the thing that I'm taking from this is the desire, and the My Sweet Lord example is a great one, which is can I just in the process of meditation actually submit to wanting to bring out the best of myself, or the desire to be my highest self. And that's what I'm taking out of this. And how does one be their higher self then? When we practice it in meditation, and then we kind of, we kind of train our mind in some sense to remind ourselves that, look, this is what I've got to be, my highest self in my everyday. And then how do I watch for that as I go about my day?
Spiritual life is not so much about becoming something. Spiritual life is about unbecoming all the unnatural things that the world told you to be. Enlightenment is not when there's nothing more to add. Enlightenment is when there's nothing more artificial to take away. Who we are is already there within the heart. Pure consciousness is what we are in essence. But the problem right now is that we are covered by two things. In Sanskrit, we say anarthas, which means unhelpful qualities and character traits. And the other thing is upadhis, which means false identifications and labels and designations. So anarthas are like lust, anger, greed, envy, pride, ego. And upadhis are kind of like, I'm a man, I'm a millionaire, I'm an influential, powerful person in this world, all these temporary roles. So what happens is through the practice of meditation, we begin to realize and separate ourselves from these artificial identities and these unnatural qualities. You are not an angry person. You're a pure soul who right now has tendencies towards anger. And therefore, as you begin to separate yourself from those temporary impurities, then you again reawaken the true sense of who you are.
So I have a follow-up question to this. For some of the seekers, and sometimes I felt this, when we are meditating and we have a temporary connection to an identity, and sometimes when we go into meditation, sometimes the mind is just following that identity, because the real world, you've experienced that identity. You may have experienced anger, or you may have experienced desire for something, or there may have been a thought, but again, it's a thought in the material world, which you're then taking back with you into your meditation practice. And then sometimes that thought stays with you in the meditation practice. So how do I deal with that?
Of course, the more you study spiritual literature, you empower your intelligence, and through meditation, you actually feel tangible connection with the divine, the more that spiritual identity becomes a tangible reality for you.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking also when you were answering this question, because the previous answer that you gave is kind of answering that question, because the more you link yourself with the compass or the purpose of the why, the lesser the world can affect you.
Yeah, it's almost like what happens is if you imagine a child playing a computer game, and they're kind of like, oh no, it's good, and they're so emotionally in it. But someone else is looking at them, realizing this is just a virtual reality. This is like, what's this person getting worked up about? The more and more you connect in meditation with your eternal spiritual identity, the more and more you look back at this world and see it as a computer game. That doesn't mean you become irresponsible. It doesn't mean you become dysfunctional. It doesn't mean you neglect the world, but you just don't take it as seriously as you took it before, because you realize, I'm just here for some time. I'm just playing a role. I'm just passing through. This is just one chapter in a longer story. And therefore, I need to connect with who I really am. This is what really excited me about the spiritual path that I took up. That it wasn't so much that now here is the Bhagavad-gita and it's going to teach you to believe in God. But it was more a sense of here is the Bhagavad-gita and now it's going to give you a practice, a process, and a practical means to experience the presence of divinity in your life. And I think when you have that kind of experience of divinity, that actually brings everything alive.
You know, this is what I love about the beauty of the world we live in today, because one gets to really unpack and see the motivation that drives people like you and the thought process. Because sometimes one looks at, you know, somebody like you and says, hey, he's dressed in saffron and he's, you know, he's dressed a certain way and he looks a certain way, and I have a preconceived notion sometimes. But when we are able to really unpack the mind and see the eloquence and the purity of the purpose and the power of the contribution, it really is, I think, really a joy, you know, and an opportunity in this world that we get to experience as a result. And, you know, of course, right now this podcast is much smaller than the platform that Ranveer has. But that's what I think millions will see on that one, to be able to unpack and hopefully be able to see more of, you know, the purity of the purpose. You know, with respect to the saffron clothing, I just want to ask you a little bit about why do you wear saffron and what is the significance of the tilak?
Of course, it's interesting in the Gita. I'll just preface this and then I'll answer that question. It's interesting that in the Gita, Arjun wants to walk away from the world. Arjun wants to take sannyas. Arjun wants to adopt the saffron robes. And Krishna actually tells him, no, don't. Stay in the world. Do your dharma. Be in the family. Be in your career and dedicate it in a spiritual way. Fight the battle, yes. And therefore, some people then ask us, you're teaching the Gita, you're teaching everyone to stay in the world, you're teaching this knowledge of Krishna, but then you walked away. Why did you walk away? Of course, for the mass of people, and this is not to try to put us on a pedestal and say others are in any way lesser, but for most people, it's just more natural to live in the world. It's more natural to be in a family life. It's more natural to be in that kind of scenario and practice spirituality from there. And it's in no way lesser, and it's in no way any less noble than someone who takes up the renounced order. So I just wanted to share that sometimes people see us as monks, and naturally there's a respect. Naturally, there's a sense of appreciation. But really speaking, someone living in the world could be as spiritual, if not more spiritual, than a monk. Because ultimately, it's a matter of the heart. So just to share that. When we adopt the monastic life, then we accept the saffron robes. The saffron robes have many, many different meanings, but the main meaning is that the saffron robes represent fire. Fire is very, very interesting because that represents also different things. Fire represents a certain intensity. And therefore, the monks try to generate that kind of intensity in their spiritual practice. So the saffron robes are meant to remind them of that. The saffron robes are also meant to remind them of the open pyre funerals. In India, we have this tradition that when someone passes away, then the body is burned. Therefore, you'll find many yogis even cover their body in ashes, and then others will wear saffron robes. And that idea of constantly meditating on death.
I am not the body.
that I'm not the body, but also to meditate on the temporality of life. Steve Jobs, he said, death is life's greatest change agent. Because when you're constantly thinking about death, then it helps to generate an urgency, a purposefulness in your life, because you know time is limited. So the saffron also helps us to remember that this life is temporary, that this life is transitory, that let us now utilize this time and seize the day. And saffron also represents fire, because in fire everything burns. And so the saffron robes are meant to remind us that our life is now meant to extinguish, we're meant to extinguish all the material desires and transform all of those material desires into spiritual desires. Because even in Buddhist teachings, as you were mentioning at the start of the talk today, there's this concept that material desire is the root of all dukkha, all suffering. As soon as we try to exploit and enjoy the world in a selfish, material way, it becomes the trigger of unhappiness in our life. And so the saffron robes are meant to remind us, now this is the fire of this life is meant to extinguish all the material desires.
Yeah, how beautiful, because I think if, maybe everybody may not wear saffron, but it's so interesting how it's adding a new dimension to how what you wear can almost, if we think about it and put purpose to it, can be a reminder of how we wish to live our lives. And maybe that's the takeout for everybody else. Maybe the takeout is not wear saffron all the time, but wear something that reminds you of your compass and your dharma.
Yeah. And that was actually the purpose, that many people would come and live as monks for some time. And then after living a certain number of years as a monk, they would then go out into the world and have a family life, but they would take those principles. So even though they wouldn't be living like a monk anymore, they'd still be thinking like a monk. Because that monk mindset is something that anyone can incorporate in their life, regardless of, what situation they find themselves in.
And the tilak?
Yeah, the tilak is meant to consecrate the body as a temple of God. The body is actually the greatest gift we have, because it's the vehicle through which we can express our sentiments of love and devotion through service. So the body is an instrument of service, and therefore every morning the body is consecrated with tilak to mark it, to honor it, to remind ourselves that this is a temple of God and that this is the most valuable instrument I've been given in order to serve. So the two lines represent the 2 feet of Krishna, or the 2 feet of God. And leaf represents tulsi. In India, many people will know tulsi as the sacred plant. Tulsi is the plant who, in the spiritual world, she is a personality who makes all the arrangements for Krishna's activities there. And so she represents the ideal servant. And so the leaf represents the servant who sits at the feet of the Supreme Divinity.
So you are serving the Supreme.
Yes.
And through your actions, through your body, which is the greatest gift you've received, and through the idea of burning all the desires, you serve.
It helps us to orientate our consciousness and remind ourselves of that. Yeah.
So the staff, and where does the staff fit into the rest of this beautiful explanation?
Yeah, when you take a lifelong vow of renunciation, then you accept the staff of renunciation. So we carry this with us wherever we go. It's comprises of 3 bamboo sticks, and the 3 bamboo sticks represent the mind, the body, and the words. And therefore, we carry it with us wherever we go to remind ourselves that this is what our life is dedicated to, through our mind, body, and words, to share spiritual knowledge in a spirit of compassion and kindness and sensitivity to make people's lives.
Is there a linkage between all the 3? Or is it
they're just different
reminders?
paraphernalia. Yes, different reminders, So yes, we carry it with us where we go, and it reminds us. When you're carrying this, it reminds you.
All this talk that we are doing about spirituality and really finding your purpose and, tasting the ultimate truth of life and renouncing desire. We are living in a country right now in India where you have millions of people who are tasting wealth for the first time. They've been deprived of wealth and they're tasting wealth for the first time. People have been poor, they are becoming middle class. People have been middle class, they're becoming wealthy. And they are saying, hello, let me taste the fruit of my desire, because I haven't tasted it for so long. And who are you to tell me? So sure, we are nobody to tell. But, the feeling is that now I finally got what I need. So, sometimes when you suppress for a longer period of time, one may have a reaction that I go deep in. Like, I had a friend who was telling me that he's seen in his circle that people who would have had trying circumstances would then now be quite successful and then just push themselves into desire. And that desire may manifest itself through, excessive drinking or just trying to taste all the alcohol in the world. May not be, I'm not going to label it as excessive drinking, but the desire to taste all the different alcohol in the world, the X and the Y, which I would only dreamt of visiting every, maybe sometimes trying every drug in the world, because it's like, oh, now I can afford it, being attached to every, fancy car or every fancy clothing brand. And, of course, all this exists in the material world. It exists. What would you advise to them? I mean, if this has been suppressed and now I am free, so I just want to taste it. What would be your view on that?
As you quite rightly mentioned at the beginning, like, what can we say? It's not that we are here to force our ideas or opinions on anyone. Everyone goes through their life and everyone will have to go through their experiences. And for many people, that's an experience that they feel they need to go through, to enjoy, to experience, to satisfy that curiosity and inquisitiveness of what all of that is really like. What we come out and share with such people is that if you look at history, there are people who have done all of those things and at the end of it have found it to still leave a vacuum within their heart. And therefore, it's not that you can't do those things. By all means, you can do those things. Even Krishna tells Arjuna, now it's up to you. You do what you want to do. But we can perhaps share with you that it may not satisfy you. It may not fulfill you in a deep way. And therefore, maybe it's good to also open up some spiritual exploration and see where both paths and how both paths could really.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Maybe, and I really like what you said about that. Maybe sometimes you need to go through it. Yeah. So I would say that, from the point of view of actually feeling those experiences, though, and those are sometimes for many of us necessary experiences. And only once we finish those necessary experiences may we ultimately arrive at the place where we need to arrive. And maybe the only suggestion that I can have, which is, is if you're tasting a lot of this, maybe try to taste a bit of this also, which is what you're saying, which is taste a bit of the path of really steadying your mind, taste a bit of the path of connecting with oneself, taste a little bit of the path of investing in your growth, taste a little bit of the path of connecting with the divine. Because if you taste a bit of that and you taste a bit of this,
then you can do an comparison.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of an exploration.
I think so. And I had a similar experience in my life. As I mentioned, I came across the Bhagavad-gita when I was 15, and when I was 18, I was already practicing. But 18 is the age when you go to university. And university means you're away from home for the first time. And you're in the center of London, and you have everything there, all the entertainment, all the different outlets to engage your mind and your senses in different things. And so here I was as an 18-year-old, and at night time we were doing what students do the best. And the next day I was at the temple. Well, I'll leave that to your imagination. But then the very next day I was at the temple. One night dancing at a nightclub. And the very next day dancing in front of Krishna in a temple. And it was a very revealing time in my life, because I saw two approaches to happiness. And in one, I saw a lot of superficiality. I saw a lot of shallowness. I saw a lot of trying hard, but maybe not experiencing that much. And in the other life, I saw a lot of unassuming beauty and a lot of deep fulfillment in a very simple and pure way. And that made me wonder, which path should I go on? But as you said, maybe for many people, they have to experience, and therefore it's not for us to,
For me, it was also similar. Not so similar. It was slightly different, but, the essence was similar. I was constantly getting high till I got a taste of thinking higher. And then the day I got the taste of thinking higher, I stopped getting high. So it's just sometimes...
And Krishna, actually, you've mentioned something straight out of the Gita. In a beautiful verse, Krishna says, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinam raso varjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. Krishna says, you may restrict someone from enjoyment, but only when one gives up that enjoyment because they've experienced a higher taste will that person be steady in their consciousness. Raso varjam rasopyasya. You have to give up the lower thing by experiencing something higher. So I think when we experience, as you said, that was a good line. I was getting higher until I started thinking higher. So that was the higher taste. And then naturally you can say, no, that doesn't hold any intrigue for me anymore.
And, on this tasting a bit of both the sides of life, we are very grateful that you have worked, I wouldn't say worked, but you've really devoted yourself, and we are grateful to be able to put some of the work you've put in as gifts on. So when we are discussing about tasting both these sides of life, you've really devoted and given us the gift on the Level SuperMind app of building something very special where people can taste a little bit of, through sadhana, a little bit of what the wisdom you hold. So you've created a series of very special meditations for us. So firstly, we are deeply grateful for that, and we are so lucky that you found the platform worthy to be able to build on it. And it's, I think, as I speak with you, the responsibility and really living through the goal that you have, which is to get people more and more invested in growing themselves. That's a responsibility that I feel we have to now take even more with more vehemence. But this series that you've created for so many who can start that journey, can you tell us a little bit about what you've created?
Yeah, I'm so excited, and my deep gratitude to yourself and the team for giving us the opportunity to share this with you and with everyone out there. The one constant in my life over the last 25 years has been the chanting of mantra every single day. Practically in the last 25 years, not a day has gone by where at 5 o'clock in the morning, I haven't been up chanting this mantra. And it's been one of the most grounding, one of the most revealing, one of the most inspiring and empowering practices in my life. And so through this meditation series, I try to share some of those insights of how it can be a similarly empowering tool for anyone out there. So it's really beautiful. In this series, we'll go through 6 keys which can help you to unlock the power of mantra. We talk about something called yojana, which means alignment. Before we meditate, we bring our full presence, mind and body, to the meditation. The second aspect is known as sambandha. When we meditate and we understand the relationship of ourself and the divine, when we understand the context of spiritual reality and we meditate with that knowledge, then the meditation goes deeper. So the second key is sambandha. And then we talk about seva. Some people think meditation is selfish because it's just about yourself. But actually, meditation is a seva. It's a selfless service in which we dedicate ourselves to the divine. And as an outpouring of that, we then become servants of the whole world. And so seva is the part of meditation which helps us to connect in a mood of service. And then in the fourth key, we add some more spice to the equation by talking about something called vipralamba. Vipralamba means separation. We talked about that today, this desperation, this longing, this cry of the soul to want to connect. And that intensifies our meditation and brings us in closer communion with the divine. The fifth principle is known as sharanagati, which means surrender. Meditation is a beautiful way to align ourselves with the will of providence. Every day when we walk out in the world, things happen and we're constantly frustrated, we're constantly fighting, we're constantly often unhappy with how things are panning out. But through this meditation technique in which we imbibe saranagati or surrender, we learn acceptance to synchronize ourselves with the divine will. And the final key is known as sankalpa, which means the determination. And how do we then take these 5 prior principles and meditation, and with the 6th principle, sankalpa, create a determination to make this a part of my daily existence. And through these 6 keys, we really delve deeper into how mantra meditation can be hugely transformative.
And the mantra that
And the mantra we're chanting is the Maha mantra, the great mantra made up of the names of Krishna, Rama, and Hare. And as we know, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Very simple, very beautiful, but very sublime and very powerful in bringing us in contact with the reality which we seek to experience.
And the last question I have before, there's a very interesting point you mentioned. I forgot to speak about that, about Hare being the divine feminine. Now that's it's a unique perspective, which I think in India we don't really touch upon as much. Could you talk about Hare as part of the Hare, Krishna and Rama being the divine feminine?
Yes. in most religions, people have a sense that God is a man. But in Vedic conception, God is the complete whole. So there's always a masculine aspect to God, and there's always a feminine counterpart, and they are inseparable. Therefore, whenever we talk about Krishna, we have to talk about Radha. Whenever we talk about Ram, we have to talk about Sita. Whenever we talk about Narayan, we have to talk about Lakshmi. And therefore, in the Hare Krishna mantra, when we say Hare, it's referring to the feminine aspect of the divine. Generally, in the world today, men are known for certain character traits and ladies are known for different character traits. Men tend to be more disciplined, more focused, more analytical, but the female energy contains more compassion, more kindness, more nurturing, more encouragement, more forgiveness. And therefore, in the Hare Krishna mantra, when we chant Hare and we invoke the feminine divine, then we are tapping into all of these other aspects of the divine qualities of forgiveness, kindness, compassion, love, nurturing. And through connecting with the feminine divine, it allows us an avenue to enter into a deeper connection. And so, yes, the technical name for Vedic philosophy, sometimes people ask, are you polytheistic? And we say, not quite. They say, are you then monotheistic? Say not quite. If you want to know what we really are, then we believe in polymorphic bi-monotheism. And I'll just unpack that because it could be a little complicated. Monotheistic, we believe there's one God. But bi-monotheistic, because that one God always has a female counterpart. But polymorphic, bi-monotheistic, because that one God who has a feminine divine can also appear in this world in many, many different ways and different forms, and therefore appears in different avatars. And so that is what the Vedic body of literature offers us.
Geeking it out and making it cool. It is cool. It is cool. And I'm glad actually that we got the opportunity to hear it in so many ways. I have so many more questions, but we have hopefully another conversation to come, because you are somebody who's through this conversation quoted people across the world, and you've quoted different faiths, and you've got so much perspective. And I know that Ranveer has covered in his episode a little bit of your early life and your life in general. And I'm sure that, as we put this out and it helps millions, we can then come back and hear a lot more from you. So thank you so much for spending this time and sharing everything that you're sharing, and really sowing the seeds to many in terms of walking the path that we are supposed to walk.
Thank you for your service, your kindness, and for giving us an opportunity to serve. And in that spirit of quoting many different people, I think I tried to quote something in the middle and I got it slightly wrong. So let me just quote it here again, which is maybe a nice end to our conversation here. I think I quoted Rabindranath Tagore, and now it's come to my mind. What he actually said was, I slept and I dreamt that life was joy. I woke and I realized that life was service. But then I began to serve and I realized that service was joy. And I think that maybe encapsulates so much of what we've talked about today. So I'm so happy and so grateful and so appreciative, and I wish Level SuperMind and all the work that you're doing success and traction and attention in the world, because I think the contribution you make is so valuable.
Thank you. We shall try and continue to serve with joy. Thank you.